Hey guys! Tonight we're venturing somewhere cold. Unusually cold for Mount Olympus. You're high above the mortal world, where the air smells faintly of lightning and ambrosia, and the marble floors are usually warm underfoot. But not tonight. Tonight, something's gone terribly sideways. The wind has turned bitter, and not even Zeus, yes, the thunder-hurling, shape-shifting king of the gods, was prepared for this sudden storm. You'd think the ruler of the skies would know when a blizzard is coming, right? But no. Zeus, in all his glory, forgot his thunder today, and his cloak, and his socks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's falling asleep from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up the slick marble steps of Olympus, each footstep echoing into the cold. Snow, yes, actual snow, is falling in thick spirals, the kind of snow that sticks to your eyelashes and makes your teeth forget how to unclench. Which is strange, because the weather up here usually operates on an all sunshine, all the time basis. In the courtyard, Zeus stands shirtless, not triumphantly, more like stubbornly. His arms are crossed over his chest, and his nose is turning an undignified shade of magenta. A single bolt of lightning crackles in his palm, more for show than heat. "Where's my Wind-Cloak?" he grumbles, to no one in particular. Behind him, Hera sips warm nectar from a steaming mug and does not make eye contact. You clear your throat. "Did you maybe leave it in the storm vault?" Zeus sighs, eyes rolling skyward. "I haven't used that vault since the Ice Age. It's probably buried under Poseidon's fishing rods by now." You get the sense that, for all of his bravado, Zeus isn't taking the cold well. His toga is flapping like laundry in a gale, and his sandals squelch against half-frozen clouds. This, apparently, is what happens when the gods forget to renew their seasonal magic. As you glance around the frostbitten palace, you notice the fountains are frozen mid-spurt. A statue of Hermes is wearing mittens. A Pegasus nearby is trying to ice skate, and it's not going well. Historians still argue whether this particular snowstorm was divine punishment, a prank by Dionysus, or simply the gods forgetting how seasons work without mortal worshippers constantly naming days after them. Zeus finally stomps inside, trailing a mess of melting sleet, and begins rummaging through what appears to be a giant golden armoire. Toga's battle armor and a few suspiciously glittery festival outfits come flying out. "Where is it?" he mutters. "The Wind-Cloak, the one that keeps me from freezing my—" "Language," Hera warns, without looking up from her mug. You quietly start picking up tossed tunics from the floor, noting how most seem to be labeled with small celestial tags. "Winter Cloak number 1, North Wind Resistant. Cloak of Respectable Thunder. Formal cape, used for banquets only." Zeus holds up a sheer silk number and winces. "Nope, that's Aphrodite's." A thundercloud whimpers outside. Just when it seems like the cloak is truly lost to time, Hera finally speaks. "Why don't you just borrow one of Hermes' market relics? He's always peddling magical scarves and things. Some of them even talk." Zeus blinks. "I don't want a scarf that talks back." "Well," Hera shrugs, "maybe next time you won't misplace sacred wind-cloaks during cold snaps." Zeus grounds like a god in the sitcom and trudges towards the doors again. You offer. "I could go with you." He pauses, then not. "Good. Bring snacks. I have a feeling Hermes is going to try to upsell me." As you prepare to descend Mount Olympus into the chaos of Hermes' enchanted flea market, you glance back at the palace. Snow continues to fall silently, coating divine pavilions with sugary white.
Somewhere in the distance, a choir of minor muses is rehearsing a song called Let It Not Snow. You wrap your mortal cloak tighter around you and whisper, "This is going to be a long week."
You and Zeus begin your descent along a slippery marble ramp that definitely wasn't built for icy conditions. Each gust of wind feels like an insult, and the clouds beneath your feet squeak with frost. Zeus mutters something about design flaws and weatherproofing Olympus, but you mostly focus on not falling. At the foot of the slope is a smaller courtyard, partially sheltered by a crumbling colonnade and what appears to be a magical tarp tied down with golden scrolls. This is where Hermes keeps his traveling shop, which is really more of a semi-permanent roadside bazaar, filled with enchanted odds and ends, suspicious bargains, and questionable return policies. You duck beneath a banner that reads, Hermes Heirlooms and Hand-Me-Downs, slightly cursed, deeply discounted. Inside, the space is lit with floating orbs that flicker like bored fireflies. The shelves are stacked high with glowing gloves, self-filling mugs, boots that tap dance without feet, and scrolls that hum lullabies if you stare at them too long. You pass a rack of togas that whisper compliments when touched. One tells you your posture is regal, if slightly uncertain. Hermes himself is mid-haggle with a cyclops who appears to be returning a singing spear. Something about it only knowing show tunes. I told you, no refunds on musical weapons after the first thunderstorm, Hermes says cheerfully, twirling a quill behind his ear. The Cyclops grumbles and lumbers off. Ah! Hermes spots you. Frostbitten royalty and their mortal assistants, what can I do for you? Zeus clears his throat and says, as if this is a perfectly reasonable sentence, I need a cloak. Windproof. Warm. Preferably one that doesn't insult me. Hermes gasped, scandalized. Are you saying you lost the Wind-Cloak? The Wind-Cloak? Zeus, that thing has its own mood calendar. Zeus crosses his arms and says, It wandered off, or it's in Poseidon's boat closet. Same difference. Hermes nods gravely. That cloak was temperamental. Once refused to be worn in the presence of mint. Honestly, I'm not surprised it quit. He turns to you. Come, let me show you what's in stock. You follow Hermes through a maze of shelves and glowing drawers. He pulls out a shawl made entirely of fireflies. Too warm. A cape that changes color based on the wearer's dreams? Too moody. And finally, a long wrap, stitched with cloud thread and lined with whispers. This one, he says, is the invisibility shawl. Technically retired from heroic use, but still good for weather insulation and awkward exits. Zeus eyes it suspiciously. What's wrong with it? It sometimes murmurs cryptic encouragement in Old Cretan, but only on Thursdays. Zeus sighs. Fine. What's your price? Hermes grins. No drachma needed, my lord. Just, a favor. Zeus looks alarmed. What kind of favor? Hermes shrugs. You show up at one of my monthly trivia nights, bring Hades. He never comes. It throws the teams off. Historians still argue whether this myth reflects real divine tension or just a clever way to explain why sudden gusts of wind smell like burnt cocoa on Thursdays. Zeus groans but nods. Fine, but I am not doing the lightning round. Pun noted. Hermes says. You leave the market with the invisibility shawl folded neatly under Zeus's arm. It's muttering something like, Victory tastes like cinnamon, in a voice that sounds vaguely like an old librarian. As you climb back towards Olympus, the wind sharpens again, and the sky turns an icy shade in lavender. Your toes are going numb, and Zeus has stopped grumbling only because his lips are too frozen to move. You ask, Doesn't it bother you that you, of all people, can't control the cold? He shrugs. I'm in charge of storms, not drafts. That's a whole other department. A sudden gust hits, and the shawl springs open on its own, flapping and wrapping itself dramatically around Zeus's shoulders. He frowns. I didn't tell it to do that. Maybe it sensed your suffering. Or maybe, you think, it just wanted attention. Some magical objects are like that. Back at the palace gates, Hera meets you with a single eyebrow raised. Nice cloak. It came with unsolicited wisdom. Perfect, she replies. Now you have two things darting back to you. As you follow them into the warmth of the palace, the cloak begins to hum something suspiciously close to a lullaby. Zeus, resigned, lets it.
Inside Olympus, things have not improved. The hearths are sputtering, the muses are wearing fingerless gloves, and Dionysus has abandoned his wine fountain in favor of a hot grape cider experiment that, frankly, smells like regret. You and Zeus step into the main hall, where frost now glitters along the ceiling like a misplaced winter festival. The invisibility shawl drapes dramatically across his shoulders, occasionally shimmering with colors you're pretty sure don't exist in the mortal spectrum. Zeus mutters, "I still don't feel warm." The shawl responds in a dreamy purr, "Warmth begins within, O fluffy one." He squints. "Did it just call me fluffy?" You shrug. Could have been mighty, hard to say. It's got a poetic filter. Zeus grumbles and plops onto a throne that crunches faintly with ice. Then, as if summoned by sheer frustration, a minor god named Ceres drifts into the hall. He's the one technically in charge of Olympus' weather logistics. "Hello, Lord," he says in a breathy voice, trailing mist. "I've brought the latest cloud forecast. There's an issue." Zeus leans forward. "I'd guess the whole mountaintop is freezing over. You had one job." Ceres consults a scroll that immediately folds itself into a snowflake. "It seems the ancient Weather Council has reconvened without informing central administration. They've reopened the climate dial." Zeus blinks. "What dial?" You clear your throat. "Is this like when Hades installed the mood lighting board without permission?" "Worse," Ceres whispers. "The Weather Council is debating a return to seasonal chaos. No quotas, no predictability, just vibes." Historians still argue whether the Weather Council was a metaphor for shifting climate patterns or simply a dramatic way to explain spring allergies. Zeus sighs so hard it rattles the icicles hanging from his laurel crown. "Well," he says, "we're not sitting here in matching frostbite. Assemble the council. I'm attending." Ceres flutters nervously. "You've technically been suspended from council votes ever since the solar flare incident." "That was one time," Zeus snaps, "and Apollo dared me." Regardless, you follow Zeus through the shivering corridors of Olympus, past a hallway of animated oil paintings trying to huddle for warmth, and into the central chamber, a domed rotunda where the lesser gods gather to make decisions nobody wants responsibility for. There's Thalo, goddess of buds and tiny new things, Kikias, the northeast wind, wrapped in scarves made of fog, and Nephili, goddess of cloud forms, currently sketching angry snowmen into the marble floor with her toe. "Meeting called to order," Kikias wheezes. "We are in a state of climactic transition. The spring forecast is behind schedule. The sun has been spotted vacationing in Sicily." Thalo adds, "My flowers are confused. One bloomed and then immediately filed a grievance." Zeus stands, arms crossed, visibly freezing. "We need structure, a calendar, warmth. I have nostrils. They're offended." Hermes drops in halfway through the meeting via a trapdoor in the ceiling. "Sorry I'm late. Brought cookies. They're self-heating." You take one. It tastes like cinnamon and low expectations. Delightful. The council votes, slowly, with much muttering and mystical sighing. The final verdict? A 2-day grace period of cold before regulated warmth returns, but only if Zeus agrees to stop using thunderclouds as personal foot warmers. He reluctantly agrees. The cloak, listening all along, whispers, "You've done well, fluffy lord."
I'm going to throw it into the sun, Zeus mutters. Not until Thursday. That's when it compliments your eyebrows. You exit the rotunda in victory, if you can call it that. Olympus is still frosty, but at least the clouds are softening. One even waves at you as you pass. You've survived divine politics, self-aware barments, and the phrase whimsical frost, all in a day's work for someone who just wanted to stay warm.
Back in the palace, the cold has settled into an awkward kind of truce. The hallways no longer crunch underfoot, but everything still smells vaguely of pine and burnt ambrosia. You trail after Zeus, who's trying very hard not to look like someone wearing a magical cloak that speaks in rhymed riddles. The invisibility shawl now flutters in sync with his footsteps, occasionally humming what sounds like an old sea shanty. You pass Dionysus, bundled in 3 wine-stained tunics, hunched over a steaming barrel. He waves, trying to turn mulled wine into steam-powered fashion. It's, going. A nearby pair of boots coughs politely. Zeus ignores him. Where are we going now, you ask?
To see Hestia. If anyone knows how to deal with stubborn drafts, it's the goddess of home and hearth.
You head toward the inner sanctum, Hestia's wing of Olympus, a place of perpetual coziness. Here the air smells like baked bread and cinnamon, the floor is always warm, and the lighting somehow flatters everyone equally. Hestia, seated by an ancient brick oven, barely looks up as you approach. Cold still bothering you? She asks, flipping something that looks like celestial pancakes with a ladle carved from lightning wood. Zeus slumps into a beanbag throne.
I negotiated with the Weather Council, but it's still freezing, and this cloak keeps offering me advice.
It means, well, probably. It's just lonely. You raise an eyebrow. Magical textiles get bored, especially when retired. It probably hasn't been worn since Hercules tried to use it as a picnic blanket. Zeus looks appalled. That was this cloak? It still smells faintly of olives, doesn't it? You sniff. She's right. Hestia hands you a mug of something warm and spiced. It's so comforting you'd momentarily forget how your toes haven't felt feelings in hours. As Zeus begins explaining his plans for reorganizing Olympus's seasonal planning board, again, Hestia interrupts. Or, she says gently, you could stay warm without trying to micromanage nature. Zeus blinks. What? Just accept the cold? She smiles. Layer, insulate, embrace warm company. That's what hearth magic is. We don't banish the storm, we out-cozy it. You sip your drink thoughtfully. The cloak bears. Historians still debate whether Hestia's domain extended beyond fire to subtle emotional regulation. Some believe her power included unspoken maternal judgment, which, honestly, tracks. She shows you a drawer filled with enchanted mittens, toe-warming sandals, and teacups that whisper affirmations. She says, I can offer you some hearth-augmented solutions, but you'll need to accept that Olympus doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes it's just mildly uncomfortable, like family dinners. Zeus considers this, staring into the fire, as a marshmallow levitates into a golden fork beside him.
Fine, he mutters, but I want the sandals.
Of course you do, she smiles. You help carry a small pile of magical comfort items back to the great hall, slippers that hum lullabies, a curtain that blocks passive-aggressive weather, and a scarf that emits a soft aroma of toasted nuts. It's not dramatic. There are no thunderbolts or fiery decrees, just warmth returning, one sensible layer at a time. Zeus still grumbles, of course, but there's a blanket now tucked around his shoulders, and he hasn't sneezed in at least 10 minutes. The invisibility shawl settles more quietly, occasionally shifting into warm plaid. You sit by a nearby hearth and feel your eyelids dip, lulled by the steady crackle of enchanted firewood and the faint sound of the cloak whispering bedtime advice to itself. Maybe, you think, the gods don't need to control everything. Maybe they just need better winter accessories.
The next morning,
Or what counts as morning when you're this high above the mortal realm is as bright and icy as a sugar sculpture. The skies have cleared just enough to let in a teasing shaft of sun, and birds made of wind loop lazily around the palace spires. You wake to find the cloak draped over your chair, gently murmuring something about purposeful layering in its sleep. Zeus, to no one's surprise, is already pacing. "I need backup," he says mid-stride. "If this chill is creeping in now, what happens next week? Are we talking hail? Frost giants? Midwinter fashion emergencies?" You blink. Midwinter what? He waves a hand. "Doesn't matter. We need strategies." That's how you find yourself tagging along to the Palace of the North Wind, home of Boreas, the shiver-happy deity who once turned a springtime picnic into an avalanche for fun. Boreas is not exactly subtle. His palace is a gleaming glacier jutting out of the clouds, all blue quartz and icicle chandeliers. The front steps are eternally frosted, and the doormat tries to nip your toes. Zeus knocks. The door creaks open with the sound of 1,000 frozen trees sighing. Come in, booms Boreas, voice gusty enough to ruffle your eyelashes. Zeus winces. "Please don't call me that." Inside, the temperature drops at least 5 emotional degrees. Everything is carved from ice, including the furniture, the portraits, and possibly the food. A snow hare is sleeping inside a goblet. You're offered a seat on what might generously be called a cold slab of friendship. Boreas looms in a robe made of drifting mist in frosted pine needles, smelling faintly of eucalyptus and old grudges. "So," he says, settling into a chair that whistles as it adjusts, "what's this about?" Zeus explains the situation in his usual sweeping way, complete with pantomimed storms, exaggerated shivering, and a half-hearted thunderclap that only startles a nearby icicle. Boreas listens, nods, and finally says, "It sounds like you've forgotten how to winter properly." "I rule the skies," Zeus says flatly. "You rule lightning," Boreas corrects. "Weather is more nuanced. You can't just hurl a bolt at cold and expect it to apologize." Historians still argue whether Boreas was intended to represent regional weather patterns or simply the divine embodiment of smug meteorologists. The two gods go back and forth for a while. Boreas, it turns out, has strong opinions on thermal layering, wind etiquette, and proper frost deployment. He also maintains an impressive closet of winter cloaks, each one more dramatic than the last. He offers to loan Zeus one, something tasteful, made from condensed fog and light judgment. But Zeus declines. "I have a new one. It talks." "Ah," he says, "the invisibility shawl. Mine once tried to write a memoir." You ask tentatively, "Do you have any advice for managing the chill?" "Besides respecting it," says Boreas, "humor it. Cold isn't just temperature. It's story. It's texture. Let Olympus feel something, then it passes." He gestures toward the window, where slow, delicate snow begins to fall. Not aggressive, not punishing, just quiet and soft and full of silence. "It's not always about fixing," he adds. "Sometimes you just need to wait. Let things freeze, then thaw, like hearts or magical plumbing." You thank him, slightly dazed, and promise not to badmouth icicles again. As you leave, the snow outside seems gentler somehow. The cloak wraps snugly around you both, humming a nude tune that smells faintly of vanilla and pine. Even Zeus seems quieter, his breath fogging up the air in slow clouds. You say, maybe he's right. Zeus grumbles, "I still don't like being cold." "But you're not alone in it," you offer. He doesn't answer, but the shawl does. Togetherness, his nature's mitten. You decide not to question it.
By the time you return to Olympus, the frost is settled into a kind of polite mood. It's still there, clinging to columns and curling gently around stairwells, but it's less intrusive, more like background ambiance than an Arctic threat. The palace feels quieter now, like everyone's collectively agreed to stop complaining and just wear extra socks. Zeus, however, isn't quite ready to surrender to the concept of cozy acceptance. You find him in the Hall of Winds, a circular chamber where each direction of the wind has its own ornate door and mildly passive-aggressive personality. He stands before the west-facing archway, muttering, "Not that one. Zephyros always smells like daisies and smugness." You raise an eyebrow. "We're visiting the winds again?" "No," he says, "we're negotiating." And so you step into what can only be described as an atmospheric bureaucracy. The air inside the hall shifts constantly, each gust like a different mood. The southern wind is warm and lazy, drifting with hints of citrus and regret. The eastern wind is sharp, organized, and whispers in bullet points. And then there's Zephyros, the west wind, lounging on a floating chaise lounge made of lavender and compliments. "Darling," Zephyros says, waving a perfumed hand, "you look like you lost a wrestling match with a blizzard." Zeus scowls. "I need your help." Zephyros raises an eyebrow. "Is this about your ongoing feud with Boreas and the concept of goosebumps?" You watch Zeus struggle to admit vulnerability while still maintaining godlike posture. Eventually, he settles for, "Olympus is cold. I'd prefer it wasn't. Help." "Ah," Zephyros sighs dramatically. "You never just ask nicely, do you?" Historians still argue whether the winds represent elemental phenomena or ancient Greek struggles with emotional intelligence. What follows is a strange, swirly meeting involving weather charts made of mist, enchanted fan diagrams, and a heated debate over what constitutes acceptable breeziness. Zephyros, always fond of flair, insists on warm gusts scented with chamomile and plum blossoms. The southern wind drifts in, offering sultry humidity in exchange for more open fields of wheat to dance through. The eastern wind suggests mandatory wind etiquette classes for mortals who complain about bad hair days. Zeus rejects them all. Eventually, a compromise is reached, a calibrated breeze cycle. Olympus will rotate through gentle wind moods tailored to divine preferences. Morning fog massages for Hera, sunset breezes with harp accompaniment for Apollo, and a mid-afternoon cozy gust exclusively for Dionysus's grapevines. You're not sure what any of that means, but the cloak approves. It flutters and releases a faint scent of peppermint tea. As the meeting adjourns, Zephyros floats over to you. "You're lucky," he says. "Zeus only listens to people who hand him cookies or remind him he's not invincible." You shrug. "I do both." "Wise," he purrs. "If you ever want to intern for a more fragrant wind, call me." You politely decline. Back in the main palace, things already feel different. Curtains sway more gently. The icicles have softened into musical drips. The paintings on the walls stop shivering. Even Dionysus's barrel of questionable cider has stopped fizzing like an emotional soda can. Zeus lounges on his throne, cloak firmly wrapped, watching the breeze rustle the flames in the great hall's hearth. "I suppose," he mutters, "it wasn't entirely terrible to talk to the winds." You smirk. "Did one of them give you a compliment?" "No," he lies too quickly.
But Cloak whispers, "His eyebrows are majestic in gusts under 12 knots." You say nothing, but you do smile.
Later that evening, when Olympus is cloaked in soft twilight and the clouds outside glow like sleepy lanterns, you find yourself in the company of Artemis. You'd expected her to be off somewhere wrestling a constellation or taming a wild sky deer, but she's in the West Garden, sharpening a silver-tipped arrow while wearing a parka made of shimmering moonlight. She spots you immediately. You're here about the cold, aren't you? Zeus, trailing behind, grumbles something about extreme layering and fashion betrayal. Artemis laughs softly. You never liked winter. Even as kids, you tried to ban icicles because they made your nose look undignified. I stand by that, Zeus says. They drip at unpredictable angles. You sit beside Artemis on a log bench that radiates gentle heat, likely enchanted, and watch as she demonstrates how to string a bow while wearing mittens. I've got tricks, she says, for surviving the cold without losing your sense of drama. She opens a small pack made of dewdrops and animal fur. Inside, heat stones that glow when whispered to, arrows that ignite on snow contact, and something she calls mystical layering philosophy. It's all about the intent behind your warmth, she explains. Every piece of clothing is a spell. Socks are declarations, hoods or boundaries. Zeus looks deeply confused. Is this a metaphor? Yes, she says, but also not. Artemis proceeds to demonstrate snowshoe archery, which involves launching arrows from a standing slide over a frozen stream. The stream, of course, is managed by naiads who demand compliments in exchange for safe footing. You try it. You're not graceful. Your arrow hits a tree that promptly sprouts a single frosted apple in protest. Zeus tries it too. He slips, swears, and the invisibility cloak flares out to cushion his fall with dramatic wind. It hums something that sounds suspiciously like a slow-motion opera chorus. Artemis doesn't laugh openly, but her quiver jiggles. Historians still debate whether Artemis actually invented winter survival rituals or merely adapted them from mortal huntresses. Either way, she's practical, layered, and deeply unbothered by snow. You don't conquer cold, she tells you later, while brewing pine needle tea over a fire of whispering coals. You invite it to walk beside you, then outlast it with snacks and stubbornness. Zeus takes a sip of the tea and frowns. This tastes like brisk wisdom. Exactly, Artemis smiles. As the stars begin to flicker into the sky above Olympus, Artemis pecks you each a tiny kit. Enchanted mittens that adjust to mood swings, a headband that deflects flurries with mild sass, and a single gold-wrapped peppermint that will keep your nose warm for 2 hours. She presses the bundle into Zeus's hands. Try not to freeze your ego. He gives you a look, but doesn't argue. You walk back toward the palace under a canopy of crisp air and quiet stars. The shawl flutters less now, calmed, content, as if it approves of Artemis's nonsense approach to seasonal discomfort. Zeus eventually says, "She's annoyingly competent." You reply, "She gave you tea. You'll survive." He doesn't respond, but he puts the mittens on. They sparkle faintly. One sighs with appreciation.
The following day dawns with a gentler cold, the kind that doesn't slice at your skin but envelops you in the softest of blankets. You wake to the sounds of Zeus complaining about the wind not being dramatic enough, though you're sure it was, in fact, playing its role quite well. The house feels warmer than you remember, the sun creeping in through windows with a delicate touch, almost apologetic for its previous absence. After breakfast, Zeus has made himself comfortable, perhaps too comfortable, in a chair draped in layers of silken shawls and small fires that he insists are necessary for ambiance. You both sit there, facing a hearth that is very much on the side of overkill. The fire crackles as if it knows it's playing to an audience, and you can see that even the tiniest flame flickers in rhythm with Zeus's occasional dramatic sighs. "I'm not fond of how this feels," Zeus mutters, wriggling in his seat, pulling yet another blanket over his knees. "Too calm, too predictable." "You're just mad it's not a grand storm," you reply, sinking back into a cushion next to him, feeling the warmth wrap around your body like a comforting embrace. "It seems everything has its own form of rhythm today." calm, balanced. He grumbles something unintelligible, but seems satisfied by the silence that follows. And then the conversation shifts, subtly but steadily, as it tends to do when you're sharing a quiet, slow moment with the god of thunder. Zeus turns his eyes toward the mountains outside the window, their jagged edges now softened by a dusting of snow. There's an elegance in the way the scene looks now, almost romantic in its simplicity. "Do you ever wonder," Zeus says, staring at the view, "how many of us truly understand the cold?" You tilt your head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "People fear it, run from it, curse it, but perhaps the cold is the only thing that teaches us true comfort." You pause, considering the thought. There's truth there, you realize. The cold forces a choice. You either retreat from it or you embrace it and find warmth where you didn't expect. "It's a paradox," you murmur. "We never learn to appreciate warmth until we've known the cold." Zeus looks at you, his eyes gleaming with an unspoken understanding. He nods slowly, thoughtfully, then gives a soft, almost imperceptible smile. Perhaps the cold hides something we never expect, something deeper, a quiet understanding that we are all connected, whether in the storm or in the stillness. His words settle in the room, wrapping themselves around you like the shawls he's buried in. For a moment, the only sound you hear is the occasional crack of the fire, followed by the soft wind outside. You let that thought linger. Time slips by gently, and for the rest of the day, you both keep to the quiet rhythm of things. There's no need for grand gestures, no need for winds to howl or storms to roar. Instead, the world outside remains still, waiting. The universe, it seems, has decided to pause, giving space for reflection. Zeus doesn't mention the cold again, but you can tell by the way he shifts in his chair, by the way he allows the gentle breeze from the window to curl around him, that something has shifted. The storm, it seems, was never meant to be fought. The cold, in its stillness, has brought clarity, the kind of clarity only found in quiet moments, where even the gods have to sit still and listen.
The next morning, you wake to the strangest sound in Olympus. Nothing. No thunder, no wind tantrums, not even the usual harp-playing sunrise birds. Just quiet. The sort of peaceful, weighty silence that makes you wonder if someone hit the universal mute button. Zeus is already up, pacing in what you suspect is his version of a bathrobe, a toga with embroidery that says "King of the Chill" in shimmering thread. He's sipping something suspiciously frothy and warm from a goblet shaped like a cloud. You follow him down the corridor toward the Hall of Seasons, where he has one final item on his newly invented cold mitigation agenda: the biannual closet cleanout. This, you've learned, is not just about clothing. When gods swap out their seasonal wardrobes, it becomes an event, a bureaucratic spectacle where ancient relics, magical garments, and weather-sensitive accessories all get evaluated, ranked, and filed under categories like active use, ceremonial only, or too cursed to donate. Zeus stands before a golden door sealed with a swirling emblem of snowflakes and sunrays. With a snap of his fingers, the vault creaks open, revealing rows and rows of divine garments hung in midair, organized by season and mood. Some glow faintly, one weeps gently.
Everything I haven't worn in a century goes.
Except the lightning speed sandals. Those are vintage. You glance at a few questionable items. A toga made entirely of peacock feathers, a belt labeled Wrath, medium, and a scarf that appears to be whispering complaints about dust. As you sort through the layers of history, Zeus begins to explain each item like a museum tour guide with a flair for drama.
This is the cape of solar diplomacy. I wore it once. Everyone got sunburned. It was glorious.
You pick up a pair of gloves that spark slightly on contact. These?
Those are for shaking hands with mortals without shocking them into temporary enlightenment. Kind of considerate, actually. Those were Hera's idea. And there it is again, that soft edge you started to notice. The bluster is still there, but underneath it all, he's adapting. Slowly, as only an immortal can. Historians still debate whether divine wardrobe rituals were symbolic representations of seasonal change or just very well-funded cosplay. Either way, the gods took it seriously. After 2 hours of negotiating with scarves that don't want to be folded and boots that refuse to be boxed, the closet is almost cleared. At the back, tucked behind a shimmering veil of wind-stitched fabric, Zeus pauses. There, floating serenely, is the Wind-Cloak, the original one. It's glorious, long and silver-threaded, with a hem that moves like mist and a collar stitched from thunderclouds. It practically hums with nostalgia and neglected power. Zeus steps forward. "It was here all along," he says, almost reverently. You frown. Why didn't it respond before? It only shows itself when you're in the right mindset. The Wind-Cloak prefers emotional readiness and a mild sense of irony. Zeus opens his mouth to protest, then closes it again. He knows she's right. With great ceremony and a bit of awkward fumbling, he removes the invisibility shawl, which pouts but unspools politely, and gently wraps the Wind-Cloak around his shoulders. It shivers once, then settles, and something shifts. The room stills. The air warms slightly. Outside, clouds part, not dramatically, just enough to let in a sliver of soft golden sun. Zeus closes his eyes. "It fits," he says. You nod. Of course it does. The cloak doesn't speak, but it doesn't need to. Its presence is enough. Solid, quiet, grounding. You step back, allowing the moment to breathe. In the stillness, surrounded by discarded capes and giggling gloves, something ancient and serene hums beneath it all. Not power, not ego, balance.
The Wind-Cloak glides softly with Zeus's every movement, like it's learned his gait again after all this time. There's no shimmer, no roar of power, just the quiet dignity of a garment that remembers storms from centuries ago. It doesn't try to impress, it simply is. As you exit the Hall of Seasons, the cloak lets out a long exhale, not from Zeus, but from itself. The air shifts, you can feel it. The kind of shift that tells birds to head south and reminds mountains to hold still through winter. Zeus doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. Instead, he leads you out onto a balcony overlooking Olympus. The sky is cleared in the soft bands of peach and blue, and the snow now falls in lazy spirals, more decorative than disruptive. Below, you spot Apollo sunning himself beside a reflective lake that probably didn't exist yesterday. He's wearing a full-length mirror cape and pretending he invented sunlight. Typical. Then comes the great Olympus debrief. You didn't know such a thing existed, but apparently it's customary for the gods to hold a post-chaos meeting to pretend everything went according to plan. The Hall of Echoes is where it happens. You've never been before, mostly because you assumed it was just a hallway that made your footsteps sound insecure. But now, stepping in, you realize it's a grand amphitheater made of whispering marble. Every whisper here becomes a gentle echo, enough to be heard, never loud enough to overwhelm. The gods begin to arrive. Ares, clearly unimpressed with snow, is wrapped in a bearskin he definitely hunted just for this event. Aphrodite floats in with slippers of roses and zero tolerance for ice. Hermes brings snacks. Hera brings a list. "I'll be reading from my winter operations notes," Hera announces, holding a scroll that unfurls dramatically across the floor. Zeus sighs, "Can we not? You lost a sentient cloak and forgot seasonal transition protocol," says Hera sweetly. "We're absolutely doing this."
Historians still argue whether divine meetings reflected real decision-making or were just elaborate excuses to assign blame without consequences. Today, it's clearly the latter. The discussion meanders, as divine discussions do, from wind etiquette to thermal enchantments to why Dionysus was fermenting eggnog in the sacred chalice. When it's finally Zeus's turn, the hall goes quiet. He stands, adjusts the cloak, and says simply, "We're good now." There's a pause. A long, stunned pause. Then Hestia smiles, Hermes raises a cookie in salute, and even Hera crosses one item off her scroll. No one claps, no one cheers, but the echo of that simple declaration lingers, like a song that doesn't need music. Later, you and Zeus find yourselves in the courtyard again. The snow crunches softly beneath your feet, but now it feels less like a threat and more like background texture. You sit beside a fire pit, watching faint sparks dance into the sky. The cloak coils lightly at Zeus's back, still and calm. "I think I forgot something," he mutters. "What?" He looks around. "How to just be still?" You nod, understanding. The cold didn't just make him uncomfortable, it made him slow down. Sit. Wait. Listen. Not things gods usually make time for. "Maybe," you say gently, "that was the point." The cloak flutters once in agreement. Zeus doesn't argue. Instead, he offers you half of a marshmallow that Hestia insists is enchanted for emotional resilience. It's sticky and oddly affirming. You both sit there, fire crackling, snow whispering, and stars peeking through. No storms, no speeches. Just warmth returning, one quiet moment at a time.
It's the kind of Olympus night that makes you question whether time even exists here. The stars hang low and still, and the clouds lie flat like sheets just folded. Even the wind seems to tiptoe around the edges of the marble balustrade where you and Zeus lean, sipping something warm and fragrant from mugs that refill themselves when you sigh wistfully. Zeus clears his throat in the dramatic way he always does when he's about to pretend something mundane is a revelation. "We need a system." You raise an eyebrow. For what? Emotional temperature control? He looks at you seriously. Seasonal wardrobe synchronization between all the gods. No more mismatched climate expectations. You blink. You want a divine dress code? Not dress code, he clarifies. Dress calendar. Like spring silks start on the third full moon after solstice. Wool cloaks expire in May. We coordinate enchantments, color palettes, maybe host a runway. You laugh, and Zeus does not. He is absolutely serious. And that's how you end up spending the rest of the evening in the hall of fabricated realities, where illusions of potential god outfits swirl around you like models in a cloud fashion show. The ceiling flickers between seasons. Hera's autumn rain robe receives polite applause from an enchanted curtain. Ares' battle in beige concept gets immediately vetoed by every goddess present. Zeus paces like a producer on opening night. You, meanwhile, are handed a clipboard by a nymph named Talia, who introduces herself as head of wardrobe logistics. She says, "We've been waiting centuries for someone to push this through." The cloak flutters on Zeus's shoulders, emitting occasional approval sounds that resemble low humming or perhaps passive-aggressive yawns. You can't quite tell. One illusion catches your eye, a toga that adjusts its thickness based on humidity, ideal for gods who want to maintain their mystique while sweating discreetly. Another appears to be made of rainbows woven with silence. Zeus approves the silence weave, but insists the rainbows not clash with thunderbolt accessories. "Image matters," he says, as if narrating a documentary on divine public relations.
Historians still argue whether the gods actually cared about mortal impressions or simply liked shiny things. Evidence leans toward both. After hours of reviewing magical textile proposals, enchantment compatibility, and emotional layering theory, you realize something. This isn't just vanity, not entirely. It's order, ritual, something to structure eternity around. Gods, for all their immortality, need rhythms too. You look over at Zeus, who's now draped in half-materialized prototype cloak that changes color based on mood, currently hovering between stormy indigo and slightly embarrassed fuchsia. He's nodding slowly, actually listening to Talia's pitch about seasonal wardrobe audits. There's peace in it, in the structure, in the mundane. Not every battle needs lightning. Some just need fabric and a reliable forecast. You helped finalize a draft schedule. Early spring, breezy neutrals with floral resistance enchantments. Summer, storm linen with sun-reflective trim. Autumn, wind-layered velvet, humidity activated. Winter, no-nonsense warmth. Optional sass. You and Zeus walk out of the hall well past midnight, each wrapped in layers of sleepy satisfaction and surprisingly well-insulated shawls. You stop outside, letting the stars rest above you like punctuation at the end of a gentle thought. "Not bad," Zeus says. "You made a fashion committee." "I made order," he corrects. You roll your eyes, but the warmth in your chest lingers. The wind sighs through the corridor behind you. Less insistent now, more like a lullaby. And somewhere, the cloak whispers, "Rhythm is power dressed in comfort."
A few days pass, and winter on Olympus has become tolerable, cozy even. There are still gusts of wind that sneak down the hallways like mischievous children, but the hearths stay lit, and the gods have mostly agreed not to launch any more climate-related protests until the next equinox. One morning, Zeus strolls into the great hall wearing his Wind-Cloak like it was tailored yesterday. It trails behind him with a kind of knowing grace, its edges fluttering in sync with his footsteps, no longer showing off, just existing. Comfortable. "Right," he says, cracking his knuckles like someone about to rewrite a sacred constitution. "Let's fix the sun." You choke a little on your tea. "The sun?" "Yes. Apollo's gone soft. He's been using it like a tanning lamp. No discipline, no schedule. Sunrises are getting lazy." You follow him outside to Apollo's wing, which, naturally, is constructed entirely from glowing crystal, golden lyres, and absolutely no concept of subtlety. Apollo greets you both while lounging beneath an enormous sun lamp labeled Heliomax 9000, wearing golden sandals and sipping solar nectar through a glass straw. He smiles, radiant as ever. "Oh, hey. Thought I heard thunder anxiety in the breeze." Zeus squints. "You've been dimming the sun on purpose." Apollo shrugs. "It's winter. People like soft light. We're trending toward warm ambers." "This isn't a lifestyle brand," Zeus grumbles. Apollo smirks. "It could be." You wander through the sunlight-saturated garden as the two gods bicker like rival weathermen. Flowers bloom and wilt in real time depending on who's gesturing. Birds appear, then immediately leave out of confusion. Eventually, Apollo brings out a prototype, the sun lamp conductor, a glowing orb that lets you shift light intensity with a twist. I call it solstice mode. Zeus narrows his eyes. "You're turning the sun into a dimmer switch." "It's ergonomic." You test it. The orb pulses softly in your hands. With a slight turn, the garden shifts from blazing midsummer to cozy dust. Another turn brings a silvery half-light,
like the hour just before dreams start. It's oddly pleasant. Historians still argue whether the ancient Greeks truly viewed the sun as a literal chariot or more of a divine lighting arrangement curated by Apollo's mood swings. Based on today, it's clearly the latter. Zeus eventually relents, mostly because the cloak tightens slightly around his shoulders, whispering something like, "Let the boy glow." Instead of clamping down, he proposes a compromise. Apollo gets solstice mode, but only if sunrises return to their classic dramatic pace, with a musical swell and at least one rooster silhouette. Apollo accepts. To celebrate, he hosts a sun reboot party, which includes a sunrise rehearsal, a buffet of radiant citrus, and a brief but passionate ode to the golden hour. Zeus even toasts with a mug of hot lightning cider, admitting not mad for a flame-haired show-off. Apollo bows theatrically. Coming from you, that's basically poetry. The party lingers into the afternoon, lazy glowing sprawl of cushions and soft shadows. You drift through it, basking in the contentment of small victories, the kind you only recognize after things nearly froze over. Later, as the sun begins to set, slowly, thoughtfully, you stand beside Zeus on a balcony, warmed by the last golden light. "You're letting go," you say. He doesn't answer right away. Then, "Not letting go, just adjusting the dial." The cloak flutters once, an agreement, or maybe applause.
It's the calm after the almost storm. Olympus has settled into that rarest of moods, serenity. Even the fountains, normally prone to occasional spontaneous poetry recitations, are murmuring nothing more than the soft drip of thawing frost. You find yourself seated beside Zeus once again, this time at the edge of the Cloak Conservatory, a garden-like gallery filled with sentient fabrics retired from divine service. Yes, that's a real place. It's where enchanted garments come to be gently forgotten. Scarves that once danced in battle, shawls that whispered spells. One vest, apparently, that briefly controlled volcanic eruptions but retired due to burnout. You walk slowly past glass cases labeled in golden script, Cape of Temporary Omnipresence, Tunic of the 6 Seasons, and the cardigan that knows too much. The cloaks sway slightly as you pass, either from recognition or just breeze. A few hum lullabies. One of them sighs as if disappointed it's not still being worn. "I should visit more often. These old things earned it," Zeus mutters. He places a hand gently on the case housing the Zephyr drape, a lightweight wrap said to have tamed a cyclone just by whispering affirmations at it. The fabric rustles faintly, like a deep exhale. You glance at him. Is this nostalgia or guilt? He shrugs. A little of both. The Wind-Cloak he now wears flutters in response, as if sensing the emotions in the room. There's a dignity to it now, not just warmth. It has settled, not only around his shoulders, but into its role again. "It's strange," Zeus says, sitting beside an enchanted scarf that periodically hisses at passers-by. "I used to think power came from lightning, roar, noise. Then winter arrives, and suddenly the loudest thing is silence." You nod. Cold doesn't shout, it just waits. Exactly, and you feel it in your bones. It doesn't demand, it reminds. Historians still debate whether this period in Olympus marked a shift in divine temperament or was just a quiet fashion renaissance with spiritual undertones. Either way, the gods wore a lot more layers afterward. You wander through the conservatory in a slow loop, listening to soft rustles of cloth and memory. Each garment seems to carry a mood, a story, a whisper of its wearer. Eventually, you return to the entry bench where Zeus is inspecting a small plaque.
Do you know what this says? He asks too. You lean in. It reads, "When the world quiets, the cloak remembers." I think, Zeus says slowly, that means me too. He reaches up, touching the Wind-Cloak's edge with surprising gentleness. For a moment, the air holds still, not tense, not expectant, just still. Then a breeze picks up, a warm one, the kind that smells faintly of honeyed tea and freshly turned pages. It curls around you, through the hall past the resting garments, and out again into the sky. I think it's time, Zeus says. Time for what? He smiled. Time to go outside without complaining. You both laugh, gently but truly, and step out of the cloak conservatory into the crisp air. The cold is still there, of course, but it no longer bites. It brushes. And that, somehow, feels like the difference between a storm and a season.
The snow is melting now. Not all at once. Olympus doesn't do anything in a hurry, but in delicate gestures. You walk with Zeus through the eastern courtyards, where divine crocuses are starting to peek through slush with the cautious optimism of creatures who've seen one too many seasonal plot twists. He doesn't talk much. That's new. Zeus has always been a narrator in his own life, loud, grand, occasionally overproduced. But now he simply walks, the Wind-Cloak trailing quietly behind him, like a curtain drawn at the end of an opera. Not the final curtain, just intermission. You both stop at the Temple of Echoes, where once a year, all the sounds the gods made during the past seasons are replayed in reverse. It's a sonic ritual of reflection, an oral scrapbook. Normally, it's ridiculous. This year, it's oddly moving. From the temple steps, you hear whispers, Hera muttering about snow in her hair, Hermes laughing with a cookie in his mouth, Boreas bragging about his icicle collection, and Artemis explaining layering strategies like a podcast host with a bow. Then you hear Zeus. At first, it's just huffs and grumbles. Then the soft sighs. The laughter you almost missed when it happened. One moment even catches your breath. Him saying thank you after no one was left in the room but you and the cloak. He shifts beside you, just slightly. You think we'll remember this? He asks. The cold? No, the quiet, the after. You glance up at the sky. It's changed again. Still pale, still cool, but threaded now with gentle sunlight. The kind that doesn't demand attention, but warms the back of your neck when you forget it's there. You'll remember, you tell him, because it didn't ask you to be in control, just present. He chuckles. You keep talking like you're the one who invented wisdom. I just observed well, you shrug. The Wind-Cloak wraps around his shoulders again, not tighter, but closer. There's no performance in it now, just function, comfort, loyalty. A breeze stirs through the temple, carrying with it the scent of thawed cedar and something faintly floral. Not spring yet, but spring adjacent. Do you miss the chaos? You ask. I am the chaos, Zeus lifts a brow. Were, you correct, nudging him. He pretends to scowl. Fine, semi-chaos. Historians still argue whether Zeus mellowed with age or simply discovered that the most powerful storms are internal and most effective when channeled into patience rather than thunder. You sit a while longer, watching the clouds roll by. Not storm clouds, not thunderheads, just soft, meandering fluff, the kind children name animals in. And in that quiet, something shifts again, subtly, but unmistakably. The air feels warmer. Not everywhere, not fully, but enough. Zeus stands,
I think the Wind-Cloak is ready. Ready for what? To rest. You don't ask what he means. You don't need to. Back in the palace, he walks to the end of a quiet corridor, one rarely used except for days like today. At the far wall is a hook. Simple. Gold. Carved from the bones of a fallen star. With slow hands, he unclasps the cloak and hangs it up. It rustles once, lightly, as if sighing into sleep. I'll still keep it close, he says, but I don't need it to keep me warm anymore. You nod, not trusting your voice. Outside, the snow continues to melt. The sky opens wider. A season, it seems, has ended.
You wake to birdsong. Real birdsong. Not the celestial type that plays on loop like background music, but actual, fluttery, out-of-tune birds gossiping about twigs and breadcrumbs in the olive trees outside the palace windows. You sit up slowly, letting the moments stretch long and soft around you like a yawn held between layers of warm blankets. Zeus is already up, but he's not pacing. He's not thundering. He's in the garden, planting. You never thought you'd live long enough to witness the god of the sky elbow-deep in flower beds, but here he is, coaxing tiny sprouts from enchanted soil like they're storm clouds in training. His old lightning bolt rests nearby on a stone bench, used earlier not to smite, but to poke holes in the dirt for seed spacing. You're gardening, you say, both impressed and confused. He glances over. Hera said I needed a hobby. This seemed less destructive than wood carving. You kneel beside him, fingers brushing through soil that smells like rain and myth. The air is mild today, genuinely mild, not curated or scheduled, just naturally agreeable. No cloak, no shawl, no enchanted socks necessary. You miss it yet? He doesn't look up. The cloak? The cold, the rush, the drama. He thinks a moment and then shakes his head. No. I needed it to stop, to be forced into stillness. Reminded me of how many centuries I've spent moving forward without looking around. He pats down a row of lavender shoots with the same reverence he once used to command thunder. Historians still debate whether this mystical gardening period ever happened, or if it was merely a symbolic metaphor in scrolls scribbled by overly sentimental scribes. But the gods remember, and now so do you. Nearby, Hestia walks past with a tray of bread and butter that smells like warm forgiveness. She nods at Zeus, who nods back. No words needed. Apollo, from across the courtyard, is adjusting the angle of the sun ever so slightly to improve lighting for the crocuses. A minor muse sketches the scene, capturing Zeus's dirt-streaked toga and mildly puzzled expression as if it were the most important thing anyone had ever painted. You sit there for a long while, watching the garden breathe, watching the season do what it always does, shift. Quietly, persistently. Even Boreas, the north wind, sends only a single gust this morning. It ruffles the olive trees and then disappears with the grace of someone who's learned not every entrance needs fanfare. The Wind-Cloak remains where Zeus hung it. It doesn't move. It doesn't call. It's not needed. Not right now. And as your eyes grow heavy once again, not from exhaustion, but from contentment, you lie back in the soft grass, letting the warmth of Olympus cradle you like the gentlest of lullabies. The season has changed, and so have you. So now as the clouds roll slowly overhead and the last echoes of winter dissolve into the soft hush of spring, you feel something subtle but unmistakable settle deep within you. A kind of quiet. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. The kind that holds you gently, not tightly. You breathe in. The air is cool, but no longer biting.
The wind brushes your cheek, not like a warning, but like a friend saying goodnight. You remember the snowflakes on Olympus's steps, the argument about some dimmers, the cloak with too many opinions. You remember the firelight, the tea that tasted like pine and memory, the laughter shared over enchanted mittens. But more than anything, you remember the stillness. That gift the cold gave without asking. The lesson that warmth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums. And now, as your body sinks deeper into rest and your thoughts begin to blur like twilight on marble, you let go. Of the wind. Of the storm. Of the need to carry anything at all. Whew, you're here. Safe. Held. And the cloak, wherever it now sleeps, is humming one last lullaby just for you. Good night, traveler. Sleep well.